I'm so happy you're here with me today. Stay with me until the very end and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from around the world. When I walked into that courtroom, my daughter Sarah rolled her eyes and whispered something to her husband, Michael, that made them both laugh quietly. But then something amazing happened. The judge looked up from his papers, and his eyes met mine. His face went white like he had seen a ghost from long ago. "It's her," he whispered, so quiet I almost didn't hear him. The whole courtroom became silent. Lawyers stopped talking. The lady typing stopped her fingers. Even the security guard moved around nervously. Sarah's mean smile went away, and Michael looked confused. They had no idea what those two words meant, but I knew. I had lived long enough to know when life was about to change. They thought I was just an old lady trying to keep a house. They thought they had taken away all my pride. What they didn't know was that I had a story much older and much stronger than their greed. If this story already has you hooked, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. Every morning in Phoenix began the same way for me. I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, filled my old water pot, and reached for the blue cup with chips that had been with me for more than 22 years of breakfasts. The smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen while I checked on the purple flowers lined up on the window. My husband who died, Robert, loved those flowers. Taking care of them kept him close to me even after he was gone. My life was not special. It was the same small things every day, each one filled with memories. I had never gone far away or lived with fancy things. But I had given everything I had to raise my daughter, Sarah. I worked late at night cleaning offices. I sold homemade cookies at church events. I fixed dresses for neighbors. All so she could have chances I never had. To most people, I was just a quiet grandmother with gray hair and hands that showed years of hard work. But in my heart, I carried many years of giving up things that no one could see. That Thursday night was supposed to be special. I had spent hours making Robert's favorite beef stew, the dish Sarah used to ask for when she was little. My fingers hurt from cutting all the vegetables, but it was a good hurt. The kind that comes from making something with love. I put out my fancy tablecloth, the one I had worked on when Sarah was a teenager. I placed fresh yellow flowers in the middle of the table. I wanted to remind her that this was still her home, filled with love and memories. When they came to my house, Michael walked straight to Robert's old chair, turned on the TV, and acted like the house was his. He was a tall man with perfect dark hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly check from the government. Sarah stood there in the red dress I had bought her for Christmas. Her face was as cold as winter wind. "Mom, we need to talk," she said in a sharp voice that made her sound like a stranger. I saw Michael turn down the TV sound but not turn it off. He was watching us and the game at the same time. "Of course, sweetheart. Is everything okay?" I pointed toward the kitchen. "Dinner is almost ready. I made your favorite." "This isn't a visit for fun," Michael said quickly, his voice cutting through my words. "We have important things to talk about." Sarah didn't even look upset at his rudeness. Instead, she nodded like he had said something smart. "Mom," she continued, "the house is too big for you. You can't take care of it anymore. Michael and I need it for our growing family." My hands shook a little as I folded them in my lap. "What are you saying, Sarah?" Michael leaned forward. "We found a place for older people that's perfect for someone your age. All your basic needs will be taken care of. You'll have people around you. It makes sense." "But this is my home," I said, my voice breaking. "Your father died in this house, holding my hand. Every wall has our story." Sarah's face didn't change. "Memories are in the heart, Mom, not in the walls." "We've already started the papers," Michael added, pulling out a folder from his bag. "The place has a waiting list, but I got you moved to the front. You should be thankful." "Thankful?" The word hung in the air between us, sharp and mean. "I'm not leaving my home," I said, surprised by how strong my voice sounded. Michael's smile went away. Margaret, be smart about this. You're getting older. Just last month, you fell in the garden. What if something happens when no one's around? I wanted to tell him that I had only stumbled because the sidewalk was uneven and I caught myself before falling. But I knew it wouldn't matter. They had already decided what would happen to me without asking me. The beef stew will get cold, I said instead, getting up from my chair. Let's eat first, then talk. Sarah looked at Michael in a way that made my heart hurt. I had seen that look before. The silent talk between them whenever they thought I was being difficult. As I brought the food to the table, I saw that Sarah hadn't put out 3 plates like I asked. She had only put out 2. They weren't staying for dinner. They had never planned to stay. A few days later, Michael came without warning. He brought a man in a gray suit who looked at houses to decide how much they were worth. The man walked through my house like it was already for sale. He measured rooms quickly and wrote notes on his clipboard. The water pipes are old, he said flatly. The kitchen tiles are old-fashioned. This place would need a lot of work. I stood quietly in the corner, holding the edge of my apron. Those tiles he talked about so carelessly had been put in one by Robert's hands when Sarah was 11. I remembered the sweat on his face, the patience in his smile, the hope in his voice as he told me, this kitchen will last us forever. Now it was just a line on a list. The man poked at the living room ceiling. Water damage here. Probably roof problems. That's from when the neighbor's pipe broke last winter, I explained. It's been fixed. Mrs. Johnson can tell you. We'll need to think about roof replacement costs anyway, he continued like I hadn't said anything. Sarah followed the man around, nodding at his words, never once looking at me. Each word felt like a hammer hitting the walls of my heart. My home was no longer special to them. It was only property, numbers, and money. Mrs. Johnson appeared at the back door, holding a plate of brownies. She took one look at what was happening and frowned. Margaret, is everything all right? She asked, watching the man as he measured the door frames. Before I could answer, Michael stepped between us. Family business, ma'am. Margaret's moving to a retirement home. We're just getting the house ready to sell. Mrs. Johnson's eyes got wide, and she looked at me to see if it was true. The shame of it, having my neighbors learn about these plans before I had even agreed to them, made my cheeks burn. Nothing's decided yet, I managed to say. Actually, it is, Sarah replied coldly. Mom just hasn't accepted it yet. Mrs. Johnson put the brownies down and squeezed my hand. Call me later, she whispered before leaving. After they left, I sat alone in the kitchen. There were footprints on my clean floor and curtains left open when they had been closed. Even the air smelled different, of cologne and not caring. I picked up the phone to call Mrs. Johnson, but as I started to dial, I saw Sarah had left her scarf on the chair. It was a light pink cashmere scarf I had saved for months to buy her when she got her first nursing job. Now she was married to Michael and had quit nursing. She said it was her choice, but I always wondered. I folded the scarf carefully and placed it by the door. Even now, I couldn't help but take care of her. Are you enjoying this story so far? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more amazing stories like this one. The following week, they came back with a lawyer. Michael carried himself like a man who already owned the house, while Sarah wouldn't look at me. The lawyer spread papers across my dining table and spoke with practiced politeness. Mrs. Thompson, these are the transfer papers. Once you sign, the property will be in safe hands. Everything has been set up for your comfort. I looked at the pages, the words blurring together. Transfer of ownership. Permanent. Cannot be changed. My chest got tight as I realized this was not about selling the house to someone new. This was about taking it for themselves. I need time to look at these, I said, reaching for my reading glasses. And I'd like my own lawyer to check them. Michael laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Margaret, that's not necessary. We've taken care of everything. Still, I'd like to have someone look at them for me, I said firmly. The lawyer, David Martinez, according to his card, looked at Michael uncomfortably. Mrs. Thompson, the retirement home spot won't be held forever. This is something we need to do quickly. When I refused to sign, Michael's polite mask fell away. His tone got harder. You're not able to make decisions anymore, Margaret. Sarah is your heir. She's doing what's best for you. My ability? I repeated, feeling angry. I'm perfectly fine. The lawyer added quietly, if you don't work with us, we may have to consider legal steps for mental inability. The room spun. My own daughter, the child I had worked myself tired to raise, was getting ready to take everything I had left. My hands shook, but I forced the words out. I'm not signing anything. And if you threaten me again, I'll call the police. Now, please leave my house. Michael stood up, his face red. This is a mistake, Margaret. We're trying to help you. Help me? My voice was stronger than I expected. By taking my home? By saying I'm not capable? Sarah finally spoke, her voice tight. Mom, you're being unreasonable. We're worried about you living alone. If you were worried, you'd visit more than twice a year. You'd call me on days that aren't holidays. You'd ask what I want instead of deciding for me. Sarah's face went pale, and for a moment I thought I saw shame, but then Michael put his hand on her shoulder, and whatever doubt she felt went away. We'll be back, Margaret, Michael said as they gathered their papers. And next time we won't be asking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Robert's chair, the quiet of the house pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. For the first time, I let myself wonder if they were right. Maybe I was too old, too weak, too useless to stand in their way. The thought hurt worse than any insult Michael had ever said to me. My eyes looked at the framed photos on the wall. Sarah as a baby in my arms. Robert smiling at her graduation. Our family around Christmas dinner. Every memory told me I had lived for others, given everything. Now I was being treated like a burden. Robert, I whispered into the quiet. I don't know how to fight this alone. The next afternoon, as I walked through the house like a ghost, I opened Robert's old desk drawer. It was mostly filled with old bills, envelopes, and letters I had seen before. But tucked under them was a thin folder held with a tiny lock. My breath caught. I had never seen it in all these years. I searched the drawers, then the shelves, until I found a small brass key hidden inside one of Robert's favorite books about money. My hand shook as I put the key in the lock and turned it. The folder opened, and inside was a stack of papers neatly arranged with Robert's initials in the corner. Most pages were contracts and statements I didn't fully understand. But one caught my attention right away. It was a will signed and dated just 7 months before Robert had died. I sat in the chair as I began to read. Line by line, my world changed. Robert had been far more careful, far more smart than I had ever known. And what Sarah and Michael thought they could take from me was only a shadow of what Robert had left behind. Robert had never talked much about money. I thought we lived on his regular salary and the little I earned from odd jobs. But as I looked through the folder, the truth came out. For many years, he had quietly invested every extra dollar. He bought small buildings when prices were low. He put money into company stocks. He even bought a piece of land outside Phoenix that was now worth a fortune. The numbers on the statements made my head spin. But the biggest shock was still coming. The apartment building where Sarah and Michael lived. The place they thought they were paying rent for each month was ours. All those checks had been put into an account under Robert's name, now mine. For 3 years since his death, rent from every tenant had been quietly saved, untouched, waiting for me. My heart pounded as I realized I wasn't just a widow holding on to a single house. Robert had left me an empire. An empire my daughter and her husband knew nothing about. At the bottom of the folder was an envelope with Robert's familiar handwriting. My fingers shook as I opened the letter, and his voice seemed to rise from the page. My dearest Margaret, if you are reading this, then I am no longer by your side. Forgive me for keeping this secret, but I wanted it to be a gift for your later years. You worked harder than anyone I've ever known, and you gave everything for Sarah and me. I wanted you to live without fear, to know you would always be safe. I must also tell you I never fully trusted Michael. There is something in him that worries me. An ambition that has no heart. That is why I set up the inheritance as I did. If Sarah treats you with love and respect, she will share in this legacy. If not, you hold all the power to protect yourself. Use it wisely, not to hurt, but to teach. All my love, Robert. Tears ran down my face as I held his letter. Even from beyond, Robert was protecting me. I had never felt so loved and so sad at the same time. Why had our daughter become someone who would threaten her own mother? Where had we gone wrong? I carefully put the papers back in the folder and locked it. Then I picked up the phone and called a number I found on one of the investment statements. Phoenix Financial Services. Rebecca Martinez speaking. I took a deep breath. Ms. Martinez, my name is Margaret Thompson. My husband was Robert Thompson. I've just found some papers I'd like to talk about with you. There was a moment of silence. Then a warm voice replied, Mrs. Thompson, we've been waiting for your call for a very long time. This story is getting intense. If you want to see how it ends, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next. The next morning, I walked into Phoenix Financial Services wearing my best dress, a simple blue outfit I saved for special times. The woman at the front desk led me to a private office where a woman in her 50s stood to greet me. Mrs. Thompson, I'm Rebecca Martinez. It's an honor to finally meet you. Her handshake was firm, her eyes kind but smart. She didn't look at me the way most people looked at older women, with no patience or looking down on me. She saw me. Please call me Margaret, I said, taking a seat across from her desk. Margaret, then. I worked with Robert for over 22 years. He talked about you often, and with great love. I placed the folder on her desk. I found this yesterday. I had no idea. Rebecca nodded, not surprised. Robert wanted it that way. He said you'd work yourself to death for others if you knew there was money. He wanted you to slow down, to enjoy life. She opened her computer and turned the screen toward me. Let me show you what you own, Margaret. For the next hour, Rebecca walked me through a list of things that left me breathless. Apartment buildings, office spaces, stock investments, savings accounts. All in my name, managed quietly by Robert's trusted team at Phoenix Financial. The Sunset View Apartments where my daughter lives? I asked, still struggling to believe. Yes, that's one of your properties. 14 units, all full. Your son-in-law's rent checks go directly into your holding account, and they have no idea. None. Robert set up a management company as a buffer. The renters deal with them, not you directly. I sat back, overwhelmed. Why wouldn't he tell me any of this? Rebecca's face softened. He did plan to tell you, but then his health got bad so quickly. In his final weeks, he made me promise to look after you, to wait until you came to us. She pulled out another folder. There's something else you should know. Robert was worried about your son-in-law. He asked us to look into Michael's background. My stomach got tight. What did you find? Nothing criminal, but worrying patterns. Before marrying Sarah, Michael had big gambling debts. He's been involved in several questionable money schemes. And he's currently facing money pressure. His company is getting smaller, and his job is in danger. The pieces fell into place. Michael's sudden interest in my house, the rush to get me to sign papers, the threats of saying I was mentally unable. He's desperate for money, I whispered. Rebecca nodded. And he likely sees your house as an easy target. What about Sarah? Is she part of this? From what we've watched, she follows his lead. Robert was worried about her judgment when it came to Michael. I thought about my daughter's cold eyes at our last meeting, how she'd stood by silently while Michael threatened me. It broke my heart, but I couldn't deny the truth. What should I do? I asked. Rebecca leaned forward. That depends on what you want, Margaret. You have choices now. Many choices. As we continued talking, a plan began to form. I wouldn't just protect myself. I would take back my dignity, and maybe, just maybe, save my daughter from the man who was using her. When I left Rebecca's office, I felt different. Straighter, stronger. The weight of fear had lifted, replaced by a calm strength I hadn't felt in years. On the way home, I stopped at the grocery store. Mrs. Johnson was there, picking oranges. Margaret, she called, hurrying over. I've been worried sick. What happened with your daughter and that awful man? I smiled, a real smile that reached my eyes. Things are about to change, Dorothy, in ways nobody expects. She looked at my face. You look different today, like your old self. I feel like my old self, I replied. Actually, I feel even better. That night, I made my evening tea and watered Robert's flowers as usual. But this time I didn't feel like a woman waiting for the end. I felt like a woman about to begin again. By morning, I had made my decision. The tears from the night before had dried, replaced by a calm I hadn't felt in years. I made my coffee, watered the flowers, and set the folder of papers neatly on Robert's old desk. For the first time in a long while, I felt steady, almost unshakable. When Sarah and Michael arrived that morning with boxes and movers, expecting me to be packed and ready, they found me sitting in my armchair, drinking tea as if nothing in the world could bother me. Mom, what are you doing? Sarah asked impatiently. The movers are here. I'm not leaving, I said, my voice even. Michael smirked, stepping closer, his tone sharp. Mrs. Thompson, you don't have a choice. I met his eyes directly, refusing to look away. You're right, Michael. I don't have a choice. But it turns out you don't either. The movers stood awkwardly in the hallway, waiting for instructions. Michael waved his hand toward them like he was giving orders to soldiers. Go on, start with the living room, he barked. Not so fast, I interrupted, rising slowly from my chair. I walked to Robert's desk and picked up one of the property papers. Did you know, I asked calmly, that the apartment you've been living in for 4 years has never really belonged to you? Michael's smirk faltered. We pay rent every month, Sarah said, confused. Yes, I replied. To a management company that transfers it directly to me because I own the entire building. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the creak of the movers shifting on their feet. Sarah stared at the paper in my hand, reading it again and again. Michael grabbed it from her, his face turning pale as the truth sank in. This has to be fake, he snapped. You're lying. Check the records yourself, I said evenly. You'll find I'm not lying at all. Michael's voice rose, anger spilling through his teeth. Even if this is true, you can't stop us. We'll fight it in court. You'll lose everything. I folded my hands in front of me. On the contrary, you have 35 days to find another place to live. After that, the law allows me to kick you out. Sarah gasped, her eyes filling with panic. Mom, you can't mean that. Family doesn't plan to take away what isn't theirs, I answered firmly. You made your choice when you tried to push me out. Michael, desperate now, blurted out, Tell her, Sarah. Tell her why she can't do this. Sarah's lips trembled. Mom, I'm pregnant. The words pierced me deeper than any threat. I would be a grandmother. Yet, I was finding out like this, used as a bargaining chip. For a brief moment, my resolve wavered, but then Robert's letter echoed in my mind. Use it not to hurt, but to teach. I straightened my shoulders. Congratulations, Sarah. But that doesn't erase what you've done. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she turned toward Michael. Maybe we should just apologize. Try to make this right. Michael's face hardened. I will never bow to her. She's manipulating you. She's manipulating all of us. I stood quietly, letting his words hang in the air. The truth was finally showing itself. "Michael, please," Sarah pleaded, grabbing his arm. "She's my mother. We can't throw her out like garbage." "No," he barked, shaking her hand away. "You're weak if you give in." In that moment, I saw something shift in Sarah. For years, she had echoed his voice, copied his disrespect. Now, she was staring at him as if she truly saw him for the first time. She turned back to me, her voice trembling. "Mom, I was wrong. I let him convince me that you were a burden, and I believed him because it was easier than admitting I married the wrong man." I swallowed hard. "Words are a beginning, Sarah. But only actions will show me you've chosen differently." That afternoon, when Michael had stormed out and the movers had gone, Sarah sat across from me at the kitchen table. Her eyes were red from crying, her hands held tightly together. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "You start by telling me the truth," I said. "All of it." And so she did. How Michael had lost his job 7 months ago but kept pretending to go to work. How they were behind on credit card payments. How he'd convinced her that my house was the solution to their problems. "He said we'd sell it and use the money to start fresh," she explained, her voice small. "But he also talked about how you weren't safe living alone. And you believed him." "I wanted to," she admitted. "It was easier than facing what our life had become." I reached across the table and took her hand. It was the first time we'd truly touched in years. "The baby?" I asked gently. "It's real," she said, a hint of a smile breaking through her tears. 4 months along. Despite everything, joy stirred within me. A grandchild. A new beginning. "Sarah, you have choices to make," I said. "And they won't be easy." She nodded, squeezing my hand. "I know. You can stay here tonight," I told her. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." That night, as I prepared the guest room for Sarah, I found myself humming, an old habit I'd lost somewhere along the way. The house felt different with my daughter under its roof again. Even under these circumstances, there was hope in the air. Fragile, but real. I placed a vase of fresh violets on her nightstand, a peace offering of sorts. Then I sat down at Robert's desk and wrote a list of what needed to be done. This was just the beginning of a long journey back to family, to trust, to love. But for the first time in years, I wasn't walking it alone. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Drop a comment below and tell me which city you're watching from around the world. 3 weeks had passed since that confrontation in my living room. Sarah had moved into the guest bedroom for now, while Michael had refused to speak to either of us. The pregnancy had brought morning sickness that left Sarah pale and tired most days. But there was something else different about her. A quietness, a thoughtfulness I hadn't seen since before she married Michael. I'd spent those 3 weeks meeting with Rebecca Martinez regularly, learning about my money, understanding how much Robert had built. Each discovery felt like getting to know my husband all over again. His foresight, his quiet determination, his love expressed through protection rather than words. "Your net worth is substantial, Margaret," Rebecca explained during one of our meetings. "You could live quite comfortably for several lifetimes." The number she showed me on paper seemed impossible. I'd spent many years pinching pennies, working extra shifts, worrying about electricity bills. And all that time, Robert had been creating this safety net. Why wouldn't he tell me? I asked Rebecca for perhaps the 12th time. She smiled patiently. "Robert knew you, Margaret. He knew you'd never stop working, never stop giving everything away. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of when he couldn't do it himself anymore." That evening, as Sarah and I sat in the living room, she reading a pregnancy book, me knitting what would become a baby blanket, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I said, setting my knitting aside. When I opened the door, Michael stood there, his appearance shocking me. Gone was the polished businessman in expensive suits. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes wrinkled, his usually perfect hair uncombed. "I need to speak to my wife," he demanded, his words slightly slurred. Michael, you've been drinking, I said firmly. This isn't a good time. He tried to push past me, but I stood my ground. Let me in, Margaret. This is still my family. Not when you're like this, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. Come back tomorrow when you're sober. Mom, who is it? Sarah appeared behind me, her face draining of color when she saw Michael. What are you doing here? So, it's true, Michael spat. You've moved in with her, chosen her over me. Sarah stepped forward, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach in a protective gesture. I needed time to think, Michael. You weren't exactly being reasonable. Reasonable? He laughed bitterly. We're about to lose everything, and you're worried about being reasonable? I glanced at Sarah, seeing confusion cross her face. What do you mean lose everything? She asked. Michael ran a hand through his disheveled hair. The bank called. They're foreclosing on the cabin. What cabin? Sarah's voice rose in pitch. Michael, we don't own a cabin. His eyes darted between us, suddenly wary. The investment property. The one up at Lake Havasu. Sarah shook her head slowly. This is the first I'm hearing about any cabin, Michael. The realization hit me then. Michael had been hiding more than just unemployment from my daughter. There were secrets upon secrets. Perhaps we should all sit down, I suggested, stepping aside. But only if you can be civil, Michael. He nodded stiffly, and I led him into the house that just weeks ago he'd tried to take from me. The three of us sat in the living room, the tension so thick it seemed to press against my skin. Sarah sat on the edge of the sofa, as far from Michael as possible. I took Robert's old armchair, drawing strength from the familiar feel of the worn fabric beneath my fingers. Start from the beginning, Michael, I said. The whole truth this time. He looked trapped, like a cornered animal. I was trying to provide for our family, he began, his voice defensive. Make investments that would secure our future. By hiding things from me, Sarah interjected. By lying about where our money was going. You wouldn't have understood, Michael snapped. You're too cautious, too afraid of risk. Sometimes you have to gamble big to win big. Is that what happened to your job? I asked quietly. A gamble that didn't pay off? Michael's head whipped toward me, surprise evident in his expression. How did you? I know many things now, Michael, I said, thinking of the detailed reports Rebecca had shared with me. I know about the gambling debts, the failed investments, the job you lost 7 months ago. Sarah gasped. 7 months? You told me it was just last month. I was handling it, Michael insisted, his hands clenching into fists. I had plans. The cabin was going to be our fresh start. A cabin you bought without telling me, Sarah said, her voice trembling with anger. Using money we didn't have. I put it in my name to surprise you, Michael said, but the excuse sounded hollow even to my ears. It needed work, but it would have been worth triple in a few years. And in the meantime, I asked, how are you planning to pay for it? His eyes slid away from mine, and in that moment, I knew. My house, I said. You were counting on selling my house to cover your debts. It was a temporary solution, Michael muttered. Until my investments matured. Sarah stood up suddenly, her face flushed with anger. Investments? Is that what you call betting on those horses in Las Vegas, or the cryptocurrency scheme you lost thousands on last year? I watched as years of deception unraveled between them. Every revelation seemed to straighten Sarah's spine a little more, her voice growing stronger as Michael's excuses grew weaker. You used me, she said finally. You used me to try to get to my mother's house. That's not fair, Michael protested. I love you, Sarah. Everything I did was for us, for our future. Was getting my mother declared mentally incompetent also for our future? Sarah's voice was ice. Was threatening her part of your grand plan for our happiness? Michael had no answer for that. He looked smaller somehow, shrinking under the weight of his exposed lies. I think you should leave now, I said quietly but firmly. Sarah needs rest. This stress isn't good for the baby. He stood, swaying slightly. This isn't over, he said, but the threat in his words was undermined by the defeat in his eyes. After he left, Sarah collapsed onto the sofa, tears streaming down her face. I sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. I've been so blind, she sobbed. So stupid. No, I soothed, stroking her hair as I had when she was small. You trusted someone you loved. That's never stupid. I let him turn me against you, she whispered. My own mother. We all make mistakes, Sarah. The question is what we do after we recognize them. She looked up at me, her eyes red but clearer somehow, as if a fog had lifted. I don't know if I can fix this, any of this. We'll figure it out together, I promised. One day at a time. Later that night, after Sarah had gone to bed, I sat at Robert's desk, the moonlight spilling through the window onto his photograph. You were right about him all along, I whispered to the smiling face of my husband. I wish you were here to help us through this mess. But even as I said it, I knew Robert was helping. His foresight, his planning, his love, it was all still there, protecting us even now. The next morning, as I was making breakfast, the phone rang. It was Thomas Wright, the building manager from Sunset View Apartments. Mrs. Thompson, I'm sorry to bother you, he began, his voice tense. But there's a situation with Mr. Rodriguez. He came to the apartment last night, caused quite a disturbance. Neighbors called the police. My stomach dropped. Was anyone hurt? No, ma'am. But he damaged some property in the unit. Broke some windows, put holes in the walls. The police took him in, but I wanted you to know since you're the owner. I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. Things were escalating faster than I'd anticipated. When Sarah came downstairs, I had to tell her. Her face crumpled at first, but then something resolved in her expression. I need to see it, she said firmly. I need to see what he's done. We drove to the apartment complex in silence. Thomas met us in the lobby, keys in hand. It's pretty bad, Mrs. Thompson, he warned. The police said he was shouting about being cheated, about losing everything. The apartment that Sarah had once been so proud of was now a disaster zone. Shattered glass crunched beneath our feet as we entered. The walls had jagged holes. Family photos lay broken on the floor, and furniture had been turned over. But what caught my eye were the papers scattered everywhere. Bank statements, loan applications, betting slips. Sarah moved through the wreckage like a sleepwalker, touching things gently as if to confirm they were real. She picked up a framed photo of their wedding day. The glass was cracked across Michael's smiling face. I don't even know who that man is anymore, she said softly. As we gathered her essential belongings, Sarah found a locked drawer in Michael's desk that had somehow survived his rampage. Using a hairpin, she managed to open it, an old trick I'd taught her when she was 13 and had lost the key to her diary. Inside was a folder labeled Thompson House Appraisal and Sale. Sarah's hand shook as she opened it. He had it all planned out, she whispered, spreading the papers on the floor between us. Floor plans for renovations after they got you out. Estimates for how much they could sell it for. Even brochures for that retirement home. But there was more. Buried beneath these were documents Sarah had supposedly signed. Power of attorney forms, health directives, even a statement claiming I was showing signs of dementia. I never signed these, Sarah said, her voice rising in panic. Never. He forged my signature. I took the papers from her trembling hands. We need to take these to the police, I said, and to my lawyer. Back at home, after calling both the police and Rebecca Martinez, Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table. The magnitude of Michael's deception had left us both shaken. How could I not have seen this coming? Sarah asked, her voice hollow. There must have been signs. Manipulative people are experts at hiding their true nature, I said gently. They show you what you want to see. I gave up nursing for him, she said, the realization seeming to hit her anew. He said my career was holding us back, that his job was more important. I believed him. You can always go back, I reminded her. You were a wonderful nurse, Sarah. A small smile flickered across her face. The patients at Desert Medical still send me Christmas cards. The smile faded. But with the baby coming. One challenge at a time, I said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. First, we deal with Michael. Then we plan for your future, both of yours. The doorbell rang again, and this time it was Rebecca, carrying a briefcase and wearing an expression of grim determination. I reviewed the documents you mentioned on the phone, she said as I led her into the living room. We need to act quickly. Sarah joined us, and Rebecca laid out our options. Michael could face charges for forgery, fraud, and potentially domestic abuse given the destruction of the apartment. But pressing charges would mean a public trial, exposure, stress, all things that could complicate Sarah's pregnancy. There's another option, Rebecca said, opening her briefcase. Robert set up a trust with specific provisions for situations like this. We can leverage that to negotiate. Negotiate what? Sarah asked. A clean break, Rebecca explained. Michael walks away from any claim on your mother's property, on your marriage assets, on any future inheritance. In exchange, we settle his immediate debts and provide a modest one-time payment enough for him to start over somewhere else. Why would we give him anything? Sarah's voice was tight with anger. After what he tried to do? Because litigation is expensive and stressful, Rebecca replied pragmatically. And because sometimes the cleanest cut heals fastest. I watched my daughter struggle with this, the practical solution warring with her sense of betrayal. It's your decision, Sarah, I said. He's your husband, and it's your future at stake. She placed a protective hand over her belly. And my child's future. After a long moment, she nodded. Make the offer. I want him gone. Rebecca left with our approval to draft the settlement offer. Sarah and I spent the rest of the day in quiet activities around the house, she sorting through the belongings we'd rescued from the apartment, me preparing comfort food for dinner. The normalcy was soothing, a reminder that life could go on after upheaval. That evening, as we washed dishes side by side, Sarah broke our companionable silence. I keep thinking about Dad, she said, scrubbing a pot with more force than necessary. How he knew, how he tried to protect you from what was coming. Your father always saw people clearly, I replied. It was his gift. Did he see me clearly? She asked, her voice small. Did he know I would betray you like this? I set down the plate I was drying and turned to face her. Sarah, look at me. Your father loved you completely. He knew you might make mistakes, but he also knew your heart. He would have forgiven you in an instant, just as I have. I don't deserve it, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, I told her, wiping a tear from her cheek. It's about love and second chances. She leaned into me then, and I held my daughter as she cried for her broken marriage, for her mistakes, for the years we'd lost to Michael's influence. But also, I hoped, for the new beginning that lay ahead. The next morning brought unexpected news. Michael had been arrested again, this time for attempting to break into our house during the night. A neighbor had spotted him trying to force the back door and called the police. He was carrying documents, the officer explained when he came to take our statement. Plans of your house, financial papers. Says he was just trying to get his things. But given the restraining order his wife filed yesterday. Sarah's face had gone pale. I just filed that restraining order yesterday afternoon. How did he even know about it so soon? The officer looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, in these domestic situations, information sometimes leaks. Could be a clerk, could be someone he knows at the courthouse. After he left, Sarah paced the living room. He's not going to stop, Mom. He's desperate now. I thought about what Rebecca had said about clean breaks and fresh starts. Maybe we need to change our approach, I said slowly. Negotiation might not be enough. We called Rebecca, who arrived within the hour, bringing with her a stern-looking man she introduced as Carlos Gutierrez, a private investigator who had worked with Robert in the past. Michael Rodriguez has a history of erratic behavior when cornered, Carlos explained, laying out a file on our coffee table. His gambling issues go back further than you might think. There were incidents at his previous workplace. Money missing from accounts he managed. They let him go quietly. No charges filed, Rebecca added. Robert discovered this during his background check, which is why he never trusted Michael. Sarah looked stricken. So his job before the one he just lost, that ended because of theft too? Carlos nodded grimly. And there's more. The cabin he mentioned, it's not in foreclosure because he couldn't make payments. It's in foreclosure because he took out a second mortgage without proper documentation. The bank is investigating potential fraud. He's drowning, I murmured. No wonder he was so desperate to get his hands on this house. We need to use this information, Rebecca said firmly. Not to negotiate, but to end this cleanly. If Michael knows we have evidence of his past fraudulent activities that could send him to prison, he might take the settlement and disappear. Carlos outlined a plan, a meeting with Michael, his lawyer, and a mediator. All the evidence laid out, a clear choice presented. Take the settlement and leave our lives forever, or face prosecution for all his crimes, past and present. It seems so cold, Sarah said after they'd gone, leaving us to consider the plan. Using threats to force him away. Is it any colder than what he tried to do to us? I asked gently. Sometimes protection requires firmness, Sarah. Your father understood that. She nodded slowly. When should we do it? As soon as possible, I said. The longer this drags on, the more desperate Michael will become. 4 days later, we gathered in a conference room at Rebecca's office. Michael sat across from us, looking haggard but defiant. His lawyer, a young man who seemed increasingly uncomfortable as the meeting progressed, kept whispering urgently in his ear. Rebecca presented our case methodically, laying out document after document, the forged papers, the fraudulent loan applications, the evidence of embezzlement from his previous job that had never been reported to the authorities. Here is our offer, Mr. Rodriguez, she said finally, sliding a folder across the table. A clean settlement. Your debt's cleared, a fresh start fund of $52,000. In exchange, you relinquish all claims to any property owned by Margaret or Sarah Thompson, sign the divorce papers we've prepared, and agree to move at least 525 miles away from Phoenix. Michael's face had grown paler with each revelation. Now he looked at Sarah, something like desperation in his eyes. Sarah, you can't do this. We're having a baby. We're a family. Sarah met his gaze steadily. No, Michael, we're not a family. Not anymore. You made sure of that when you tried to steal from my mother, when you forged my signature, when you lied to me for years. If you refuse this offer, Rebecca continued calmly, we will proceed with criminal charges for forgery, fraud, attempted theft, and violation of a restraining order. The documentation of your previous indiscretions will be provided to the prosecutor. Michael's lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically. Michael shook his head, but with less conviction now. You have 26 hours to decide, Rebecca concluded, standing to signal the end of the meeting. As we prepared to leave, Michael called out, Sarah, wait. She paused, looking back at the man she had once loved enough to marry. I did love you, he said, his voice cracking. In my way. Your way wasn't good enough, she replied softly. Not for me, and certainly not for our child. Outside, in the safety of Rebecca's car, Sarah finally broke down. I feel like I've been living with a stranger for 4 years, she sobbed. Like everything was a lie. I held her close, this daughter who had found her strength again. Not everything, I assured her. The love you gave was real. The person you are, that's real. And this baby, this new life, that's as real as it gets. That night, as a spring storm rattled the windows of our home, Sarah and I sat in the kitchen drinking chamomile tea. The old house creaked and settled around us, a familiar symphony that had always brought me comfort. I keep thinking about what happens next, Sarah said, cupping her mug in both hands. After the divorce, after the baby comes, what my life looks like now. What do you want it to look like? I asked. She considered this, her face thoughtful in the soft kitchen light. I want to go back to nursing. I miss the hospital, the patients. And I want this baby to grow up knowing what real love looks like, not the controlling kind Michael showed, but the steady, supportive kind Dad gave you. Then that's what we'll work toward, I said simply. You make it sound so easy, she sighed. Not easy, I corrected. Just possible. One step at a time. If you're still with me on this incredible journey, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon. This story is about to reach its most shocking conclusion. The next day, Michael accepted our offer. The papers were signed, the agreements made. Within a week, he had left Phoenix. The divorce proceedings would take longer, but with his signed consent already in hand, it was only a matter of time. Sarah moved fully into our house, no longer a temporary arrangement, but a new beginning. We converted the study into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow that reminded me of spring sunshine. Each brush stroke felt like healing, like reclaiming something precious that had almost been lost. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I heard Sarah cry out from upstairs. I rushed to find her sitting on the nursery floor, surrounded by open boxes. Sarah, are you all right? The baby? We're fine, Mom, she assured me quickly. Look what I found. In her hands was a small quilt, faded but beautifully made, with a pattern of stars and moons. I recognized it immediately. Your baby blanket, I whispered. I made it when I was pregnant with you. I remember it, Sarah said, running her fingers over the stitches. You used to wrap me in it when I had nightmares. You said it was full of love that would keep the bad dreams away. I knelt beside her, touching the soft fabric. And now it can do the same for your little one. Sarah looked up at me, her eyes bright. I want to be the kind of mother you are. Patient, kind, strong. You will be, I assured her. And on the days when it's hard, I'll be right here to remind you. As weeks passed, our lives settled into a new rhythm. Sarah began taking online courses to renew her nursing license. I continued meetings with Rebecca, learning to manage the unexpected wealth Robert had left me. The house that Michael had tried to take from me became a true home again, filled with purpose and hope. Sarah's pregnancy progressed, her body changing, her face softening with anticipation. At her 22-week appointment, we learned she was having a girl. On the drive home, she was quieter than usual. What are you thinking about? I asked. Names, she replied. I was thinking, if it's okay with you, I'd like to name her Rose. Rose, for Dad. Robert. A way to honor him, to keep him part of her life, even though they'll never meet. Tears pricked my eyes as I reached over to squeeze her hand. He would have loved that. And her. That evening, as I watered Robert's violets on the windowsill, I noticed something remarkable. A plant that hadn't bloomed in years had put forth a single perfect purple flower. You see that, Robert? I whispered. Life goes on, in ways we never could have imagined. 3 months after Michael left, we received news that would change everything once again. Carlos Gutierrez called early one morning, his usually measured voice urgent. Mrs. Thompson, is Sarah with you? Yes, she's right here. What's wrong? I've been monitoring Michael Rodriguez's activities as we discussed. He's been spotted back in Phoenix despite our agreement. And he's been asking questions about you, about Sarah, about the house. My blood ran cold. What kind of questions? About the extent of your assets, about Robert's investments. I think someone may have tipped him off that there's more than just the house at stake. Sarah, hearing my side of the conversation, had gone pale. He's coming back for more, she whispered after I hung up. We called Rebecca immediately. Her response was swift and decisive. "We need to file for an immediate injunction," she said. "And I think it's time to contact Judge Patricia Williams." She and Robert were close friends. "The judge?" I asked, confused. Robert had mentioned her in some of his papers, but I hadn't made the connection before. "Yes, she and Robert served together on several charitable boards. Patricia has been following your situation from a distance out of respect for your privacy, but given these developments, I think she would want to help." That afternoon, we sat in Judge Patricia Williams' chambers. She was a distinguished woman in her 60s, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled at me. "Margaret Thompson," she said warmly. "Robert spoke of you often. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." I studied her face, trying to place her in my memories. "Did we ever meet, Judge Williams, when Robert was alive?" "Once, at a charity dinner. You probably wouldn't remember. There were hundreds of people. But Robert pointed you out. Said you were the reason for everything he did." Something in her tone made me believe her completely. This wasn't just professional courtesy. This was a woman who had genuinely respected my husband. "Now," she continued, her tone becoming businesslike, "Rebecca has filled me in on the situation with Michael Rodriguez. His return to Phoenix violates your settlement agreement, which gives us grounds to act." "What can we do?" Sarah asked, her hand protectively covering her growing belly. "Legally?" "Quite a lot," Judge Williams replied. "But I'm concerned about the strain on both of you, especially in your condition, young lady." She turned to me. "Margaret, Robert once told me that if anything happened to him, I should look out for you. I didn't intervene earlier because you seemed to be handling things remarkably well. But now I'm offering my help not just as a judge, but as someone who respected your husband greatly. We need to end this," I said firmly, once and for all. Judge Williams nodded, a plan already forming in her mind. "Then here's what we'll do." The plan was simple but effective. Through official channels, Michael would be informed that his presence in Phoenix violated the settlement agreement, rendering it null and void. All financial support would cease immediately, and criminal charges would be filed. Simultaneously, he would receive an invitation to a meeting at the courthouse, a chance to renegotiate before things became irreversibly worse. "He'll come," Rebecca predicted. "His type always believes they can talk their way out of trouble. And when he does," Judge Williams added grimly, "he'll find himself facing not just civil penalties, but a formal hearing on his violations." "Will I have to be there?" Sarah asked, worry creasing her brow. "No," I said firmly before anyone else could answer. "You won't face him again. I'll handle this." "Mom," she began to protest, but I shook my head. "This is what your father would have wanted, for me to protect you, to finish what he started." As we left the courthouse, the weight of what lay ahead settled on my shoulders, but it was a weight I could bear now, strengthened by truth, by love, by the knowledge that I was no longer alone in this fight. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed, I sat at Robert's desk and wrote him a letter he would never read. "My dearest Robert, I understand now why you did what you did, the secrets you kept, the protections you put in place. You saw what I couldn't or wouldn't see. You knew that someday I might need to stand on my own, to fight not just for myself, but for our family. I wish you could see Sarah now. She's finding her way back to herself, to the strong, loving woman we raised. And soon there will be a grandchild, a little girl named Rose, carrying your legacy forward. Tomorrow I face a battle you tried to spare me from, but I'm not afraid. You gave me everything I need to win, not just resources, but courage. The knowledge that I am worthy of defense. I miss you every day, but in fighting this fight, I feel closer to you than I have since you left. All my love, Margaret." I folded the letter and placed it in the box with Robert's violets. Then I went to bed, ready for whatever the morning would bring. What I didn't know then was that fate had one more surprise in store, one that would change everything when I walked into that courtroom the next day. The morning of the courthouse meeting dawned clear and bright, a sharp contrast to the storm of emotions within me. I dressed carefully in a simple gray suit I'd worn to Robert's funeral, a reminder of what I was fighting for, of the man who had protected me even beyond death. Sarah insisted on driving me despite my objections. "I won't come inside," she promised, "but I need to be nearby for my own peace of mind." We rode in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. When we arrived at the courthouse, Sarah squeezed my hand. "You don't have to do this alone, Mom." "I'm not alone," I assured her, touching the folder of documents in my purse. "Your father made sure of that." The courthouse was imposing, all marble columns and stern authority. Rebecca Martinez met me at the entrance, her usual calm demeanor bolstered by an air of determination. "Michael arrived 12 minutes ago," she informed me. "He brought a new lawyer, younger, more aggressive than the last one." "Is Judge Williams ready for us?" I asked. Rebecca nodded. "Everything is in place. Remember, Margaret, no matter what Michael says, no matter how he tries to manipulate the situation, you have truth on your side." We walked through the echoing hallways, our footsteps a steady rhythm that helped calm my racing heart. Outside courtroom D, Carlos Gutierrez waited with a nod of encouragement. "Mrs. Thompson," he said respectfully, "I'll be right behind you." The courtroom itself was smaller than I'd expected, intimate almost. Michael sat at one table with his lawyer, a sharp-featured young man in an expensive suit. They were deep in whispered conversation when we entered, but Michael's head snapped up at the sound of the door. Our eyes met across the room, and I was surprised to see not anger, but calculation in his gaze. Rebecca guided me to our table, arranging her files with practiced efficiency. The room filled gradually, court officers, a stenographer, Carlos Gutierrez taking a seat in the back row. A nervous energy permeated the space like the air before a thunderstorm. At precisely 10:30 a.m., the bailiff called for us to rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Williams presiding. The side door opened, and Judge Williams entered, her black robes lending her an air of solemn authority. She took her seat at the bench, her gaze sweeping the room before settling on me with a nearly imperceptible nod. "Be seated," she instructed. "This is a preliminary hearing regarding the violation of settlement terms between Margaret Thompson and Michael Rodriguez. Let the record show that both parties are present with counsel." She shuffled some papers, then looked directly at Michael. "Mr. Rodriguez, you were explicitly prohibited from returning to Phoenix as part of your settlement agreement. Yet here you are. Would you care to explain?" Michael's lawyer rose smoothly. "Your Honor, my client has compelling reasons for his return. We have evidence that material facts were withheld during settlement negotiations." "What material facts would those be, Counselor?" Judge Williams asked, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "The true extent of Mrs. Thompson's assets, Your Honor. We believe she and her late husband engaged in deliberate concealment of wealth to defraud my client's wife, their daughter, of her rightful inheritance." I felt my cheeks flush with indignation, but Rebecca's hand on my arm kept me seated and silent. "That's a serious allegation," Judge Williams noted. "Do you have evidence to support it?" The lawyer smiled confidently. "We do, Your Honor. We've obtained bank records indicating transfers of substantial sums shortly before Robert Thompson's death. Transfers that suggest an attempt to hide assets that should rightfully have been included in his estate." My mind raced. What records could they possibly have found? Robert had been meticulous in his planning. Judge Williams glanced at me, then back to Michael's lawyer. "I'll review these records, but first I should disclose something to the court." She paused, then continued deliberately. "I knew Robert Thompson personally. We served together on several charitable boards, and I was familiar with his financial practices." Michael's lawyer faltered visibly. "Your Honor, that would seem to be a conflict." "I'm not finished, Counselor," Judge Williams interrupted firmly. "My acquaintance with the deceased gives me particular insight into this case. Robert Thompson was known for his integrity and financial transparency. Any suggestion that he engaged in fraudulent activity would require extraordinary proof." The lawyer recovered quickly. "With all due respect, Your Honor, given your personal connection to the family, perhaps this case should be reassigned to ensure impartiality." Judge Williams considered this, then nodded. A fair point. However, before I make that determination, I'd like to hear from Mrs. Thompson's counsel. Rebecca rose with calm confidence. Your Honor, we welcome scrutiny of Robert Thompson's financial dealings. In fact, we've prepared a complete accounting of all assets in question. She approached the bench with a thick folder. These documents will show that all transfers were legitimate, properly reported to tax authorities, and designed to protect assets, not conceal them. As Judge Williams accepted the folder, the courtroom door opened quietly. I didn't turn to look, assuming it was just another court official. But then Judge Williams glanced up, and I saw her expression change subtly. She froze for a moment, her eyes widening in recognition. It's her, she said, her voice barely audible. I turned then, confused by her reaction. A woman had entered and taken a seat in the back row, an elegant woman in her 60s with silver-streaked dark hair. There was something familiar about her, but I couldn't place her. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Michael and his lawyer exchanged puzzled glances. Your Honor, Michael's lawyer prompted, clearly confused by the interruption. Judge Williams collected herself visibly. My apologies. Let's proceed. But her eyes kept drifting to the woman in the back row, and I felt a strange shift in the atmosphere of the courtroom. For the next hour, both sides presented arguments. Michael's lawyer claimed Sarah had been coerced into signing the divorce papers, that she was being manipulated by me, that the settlement was grossly unfair given the newly discovered assets. Rebecca countered with evidence of Michael's deception, the forged documents, the hidden gambling debts, the fraudulent loan applications. The back and forth continued, but I sensed Judge Williams' attention wasn't fully engaged. She kept glancing at the mysterious woman, a strange mix of emotions crossing her face. Finally, during a brief recess, Rebecca leaned close to me. Do you know who that woman is? She whispered, nodding toward the back row. I shook my head. She seems familiar, but I can't place her. That's Dr. Elena Vasquez, Rebecca said. Judge Williams' former partner from law school. They were together for 32 years, then suddenly broke up. No one ever knew why. My breath caught. 32 years ago, around the time Robert and I were first married, when I was working as a secretary at the courthouse to put him through his business courses. A distant memory stirred a young law clerk, shy and overwhelmed, crying in the break room late one evening. Me staying after hours to comfort her, bringing her coffee, helping her organize the mountain of briefs her supervisor had dumped on her. Patricia. Her name had been Patricia Morrison. Judge Williams' first name? I asked urgently. Is it Patricia? Rebecca looked surprised. Yes. Patricia Elena Williams. Why? Before I could answer, the bailiff called us back to order. Judge Williams returned to the bench, her demeanor noticeably changed, more focused, more determined. Having reviewed the evidence presented by both sides, she began, I find that Mr. Rodriguez has indeed violated the terms of his settlement agreement. Furthermore, I find his allegations regarding concealed assets to be without merit. Michael's lawyer started to object, but Judge Williams silenced him with a raised hand. I'm not finished, counselor. Given the seriousness of Mr. Rodriguez's violations and the evidence of his prior attempts to defraud Mrs. Thompson, I am ordering the immediate reinstatement of all criminal charges that were conditionally dropped as part of the settlement agreement. Michael half rose from his seat, his face flushing with anger. You can't do that. This is a setup. Sit down, Mr. Rodriguez, Judge Williams commanded, her voice sharp. One more outburst, and I'll hold you in contempt. Michael subsided, but his eyes burned with fury as Judge Williams continued. Furthermore, I am issuing a permanent restraining order prohibiting Mr. Rodriguez from approaching within 550 yards of Margaret Thompson, Sarah Thompson, their residence, or any property owned by either of them. Rebecca squeezed my hand under the table, a silent celebration of victory. Court officers will escort Mr. Rodriguez to the processing area, where he will be formally charged with forgery, fraud, and violation of court orders. Bail will be set at a hearing tomorrow morning. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as two officers approached Michael, who sat in stunned disbelief. His lawyer was frantically whispering in his ear, but Michael seemed beyond hearing. As the officers led Michael away, his eyes locked with mine one last time. The look he gave me wasn't just anger, it was hatred, pure and cold. A shiver ran through me, but I held his gaze steadily until he was gone. Judge Williams stood. "This court is adjourned. Mrs. Thompson, Ms. Martinez, would you please remain for a moment?" As the courtroom cleared, I noticed the mysterious woman, Dr. Elena Vasquez, slip quietly out the back door. Judge Williams watched her go, a fleeting expression of regret crossing her face before she composed herself and gestured for us to approach the bench. When we were alone, except for the bailiff, Judge Williams stepped down to our level. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, her formal tone softening, "I owe you an explanation." "Your Honor?" I questioned, uncertain. 32 years ago, I was a clerk at this very courthouse, overwhelmed, underprepared, and nearly ready to quit law altogether. A kind secretary stayed late one night to help me organize a case that had been dumped on me by a senior clerk. She brought me coffee, showed me how to sort the briefs efficiently, and told me I had what it took to succeed if I just believed in myself. My eyes widened as the memory crystallized. "Patricia," I said softly. "The Morrison case." "You were so tired you could barely see straight," she nodded, a smile warming her austere features. "That secretary was you, Mrs. Thompson. You saved my career that night. And now, after all these years, I finally have the chance to repay that kindness." Rebecca looked between us, clearly surprised by this revelation. "But the case," I said, "the ruling, was it fair?" "Absolutely," Judge Williams assured me. "Michael Rodriguez broke the law repeatedly. The evidence against him is overwhelming. My personal knowledge of you and your husband only confirmed what the facts already showed, that you are the wronged party here, and justice demanded I rule accordingly." She glanced toward the door where Elena had exited. Seeing her today, after so many years, it brought everything back. How close I came to giving up. How one act of kindness changed the course of my life. "I don't understand," I said gently. "What does Elena have to do with this?" A shadow crossed her face. "After you helped me with the Morrison case, I gained the confidence to pursue my career seriously. Elena and I were partners, but she wanted me to join her father's corporate firm. I chose public service instead, became a prosecutor, then a judge. She couldn't accept that choice, and we parted ways." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. She shook her head. "Don't be. I made the right decision, though, seeing her today." She straightened, professional once more. "In any case, Mrs. Thompson, you should know that Michael Rodriguez won't trouble you again. The charges against him are serious, and with his history, he's facing substantial prison time." As Rebecca and I left the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in months. Michael could no longer threaten us. Sarah and her baby were safe. The house that had been our home for decades would remain so. This has been such an incredible journey together. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life you might change. Sarah was waiting anxiously in the car. When she saw my face, she burst into tears of relief. "It's over?" she asked as I slid into the passenger seat. "It's over," I confirmed, taking her hand. "Michael is being charged. He can't come near us again." She leaned her head against the steering wheel, her shoulders shaking with emotion. I rubbed her back gently, giving her time to process everything. "What happens now?" she finally asked, wiping her eyes. "Now we go home," I said simply. "And we start building the future." That evening, as Sarah rested upstairs, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Judge Williams. "Mrs. Thompson, I hope I'm not disturbing you," she began formally. "Not at all, Judge. And please, call me Margaret." "Margaret, then. And I'm Patricia, at least outside the courtroom." She paused, then continued. "I wanted to let you know that Elena, Dr. Vasquez, asked about you after the hearing." She remembered you as well from those days at the courthouse. She did? I was surprised. I barely remembered her, just a glimpse of an elegant young woman who sometimes picked Patricia up after work. Yes. She suggested, well, she thought perhaps you might be interested in joining us for dinner sometime, to talk about old times. The invitation caught me off guard. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to intrude on your reunion. It's not an intrusion, she assured me. In fact, Elena specifically mentioned wanting to thank you. It seems I told her years ago about the secretary who saved my career. She says she was jealous then, but now she understands what a pivotal moment that was. I found myself smiling. Then I'd be delighted to join you both. After we hung up, I sat in Robert's chair, thinking about the strange circles life sometimes travels. How a small kindness offered 32 years ago had returned when I needed it most. How Robert's foresight had protected Sarah and me long after he was gone. You were right, Robert, I whispered to the empty room. Everything does come full circle eventually. Over the following weeks, our lives settled into a new pattern. Sarah's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and she enrolled in online courses to renew her nursing license, determined to restart her career once the baby was born. The dinner with Patricia and Elena proved surprisingly enjoyable. Elena, now a retired corporate attorney, was warm and forthright about her past mistakes. I was young and ambitious in all the wrong ways, she admitted over dessert. I couldn't see the value in Patricia's public service because I was too focused on status and money. And now? I asked gently. She smiled, glancing at Patricia. Now I know better. We've both lived full lives, made our choices, but it's nice to reconnect and see that some things, the important things, haven't changed. I understood what she meant. Despite all that had happened, despite Michael's betrayal and Sarah's temporary estrangement, the core of who we were remained intact. Changed, perhaps. Stronger, definitely. But still essentially ourselves. As Sarah's due date approached, I found myself thinking more and more about what would come next. The house that Michael had tried to take from me now felt too large for just Sarah, her baby, and me. And the wealth Robert had left, it seemed wrong somehow to keep it all to ourselves when so many others faced situations similar to what we had endured. One morning, as Sarah and I shared breakfast, I broached the subject that had been growing in my mind. I'd been thinking about making some changes, I began cautiously. Sarah looked up from her prenatal vitamins. What kind of changes? This house has served us well, but it's more space than we need. And there are other women out there, older women like me, who are being pushed aside, made to feel like burdens by the very people who should protect them. Sarah nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. What are you thinking, Mom? I want to use part of your father's legacy to establish a foundation. A place where women who have been abandoned or abused in their later years can find refuge, support, and dignity. That's a beautiful idea, Sarah said softly. Dad would be so proud. I thought we could call it the Safe Haven Foundation, I continued, warming to the subject. Because every woman deserves a safe place to land when her world has been turned upside down. Sarah reached across the table to squeeze my hand, her eyes bright with tears. I love it. And I want to help. Over the next month, with Rebecca's guidance, we set the foundation in motion. We purchased a large Victorian house on the edge of town and began renovations to turn it into a residence for women in need. The work gave purpose to our days, a focus beyond our own troubles. I found myself energized in a way I hadn't been since Robert's death. Each decision, from the color of the walls to the arrangement of the garden, felt meaningful, part of creating something lasting and good. Sarah threw herself into the project too, designing a children's playroom for visiting grandchildren and creating a library filled with resources on legal rights, financial literacy, and emotional healing. The first residents arrived 3 weeks before Sarah's due date. 3 women whose stories echoed aspects of my own. Maria, whose son had sold her home without permission while she was hospitalized. Dorothy, whose husband of 42 years had left her for a younger woman, freezing their joint accounts. And Isabella, who had fled an abusive relationship with nothing but the clothes on her back. Watching them begin to heal, to find their voices again, was like witnessing small miracles daily. They formed a tight-knit community, supporting each other through tears and laughter, sharing skills and stories. Maria, a former accountant, helped Dorothy untangle her financial situation. Dorothy, an avid gardener, showed Isabella how to nurture the flowers in our backyard. Isabella, who had been a teacher like Sarah, tutored Maria's grandson when he visited. As for me, I found a new identity beyond widow or victim. I became a mentor, an advocate, a force for change in our community. The local newspaper ran a story about the foundation, bringing attention to the often invisible plight of older women facing abuse and abandonment. Letters began to pour in from around the country, women sharing similar experiences, asking for help or offering support. Each one reinforced what I already knew: what had happened to me wasn't unique or rare. It was a silent epidemic, hidden behind closed doors and social expectations that older women should give in, should sacrifice, should fade quietly away. "We need to expand," I told Rebecca during one of our regular meetings. "There are so many women who need this." She smiled, unsurprised. Robert would say the same thing. He always believed in using resources to create meaningful change. "He never told me about his philanthropy," I mused. "Another secret he kept." "Not a secret," Rebecca corrected gently. "Just another way he tried to protect you from worrying. He funded scholarships, small business grants, community programs, always anonymously, always with the stipulation that the money go to those who truly needed it." A warmth spread through me at this new glimpse of the man I had loved for so many years. "Then we'll continue that legacy," I decided. "Expand the foundation, create more safe haven homes, help as many women as we can." On a bright June morning, as I was reviewing plans for our second location, Sarah's water broke. The rush to the hospital, the hours of labor, the anxious waiting, all of it passed in a blur of emotion and anticipation. When the nurse finally placed my granddaughter in my arms, I felt the circle of life complete itself once more. Rose Thompson, 7 pounds, 5 ounces, with her grandfather's determined chin and her mother's curious eyes. "Hello, little one," I whispered, touching her perfect tiny fingers. "You have quite a story to inherit." Sarah watched us from her hospital bed, exhausted but radiant. "What do you think Dad would say if he could see her?" I smiled, knowing the answer with absolute certainty. "He'd say she's perfect, and that he's been watching over her, over all of us, all along." In the days that followed, our home filled with the sounds of new life. Rose's cries and coos, Sarah's lullabies, the gentle rhythm of rocking chairs and midnight feedings. The three of us settled into a new normal, 3 generations of Thompson women supporting each other through this latest transition. But our story wasn't quite finished yet. There was one more surprise waiting for us, one final twist that would bring everything full circle in a way I never could have imagined. It started with a knock on our door on a quiet Tuesday evening. Sarah was upstairs feeding Rose, and I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard the soft rap against the wood. When I opened the door, I found a young woman standing on my porch, perhaps 25 years old, with dark hair and nervous eyes that seemed oddly familiar. "Mrs. Thompson?" she asked hesitantly. "My name is Jessica Rodriguez." I think we need to talk." My breath caught. "Rodriguez. Michael's last name." "I'm Michael's sister," she continued quickly, seeing my expression. "But please, don't close the door. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to apologize." Something in her voice, a genuine distress that couldn't be faked, made me step back and gesture her inside. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked, falling back on the basic courtesies that had served me well throughout my life. She nodded gratefully, and we sat at my kitchen table, the same table where so many important conversations had taken place over the past months. "I didn't know," Jessica began, her hands wrapped tightly around the warm mug. "I didn't know what Michael had tried to do to you and Sarah until after he was arrested. He'd been borrowing money from our family for months, telling us it was for investment opportunities. We thought he was doing well. I studied her face, seeing echoes of Michael in her features but none of his calculating coldness. When the truth came out, she continued, when we learned about the gambling, the fraud, what he tried to do to his own wife and her mother, our whole family was devastated. We pooled our resources to pay back everyone he'd stolen from, but we knew that wasn't enough. What do you want from me? I asked, not unkindly but directly. Nothing, she said quickly. I don't want anything. I needed you to know that not all of us are like Michael. And I wanted to give you this. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, setting it carefully on the table between us. Michael had life insurance, a policy our parents had taken out years ago and maintained. When he died in prison last month, the money came to us. But we don't want it. Not a penny of it. My eyes widened. Michael was dead? Heart attack, Jessica explained quietly. The stress, the guilt, the other inmates who didn't take kindly to men who abused elderly women, it caught up with him. I found that I felt no satisfaction in this news, only a deep sadness for the waste of a life that could have been different. This check, Jessica continued, tapping the envelope, represents his life insurance payout. $53,000. We want you to have it for your foundation, for the women you're helping. Maybe some good can come from this tragedy. I stared at the envelope, overwhelmed by the unexpected gesture. You don't have to do this, I said softly. Yes, we do, Jessica replied firmly. It's the only way we can sleep at night, knowing that something positive might come from our brother's destructive choices. After Jessica left, I sat alone in my kitchen, holding the envelope and thinking about the strange ways that justice sometimes works. Michael had tried to steal my home, my dignity, my relationship with my daughter. In the end, his actions had led to something beautiful, the foundation that was helping women across the state, and now this unexpected gift that would allow us to help even more. When Sarah came downstairs with Rose in her arms, I told her about Jessica's visit. It's like Dad always said, she mused, settling the baby in her bouncer. What goes around comes around. But I never expected it to come around like this. I can't believe we've reached this point in the story together. If you've been moved by this journey, please hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs hope today. 5 years have passed since that day in the courtroom when Judge Williams froze at the sight of me. The garden in Phoenix is alive with color, and my granddaughter Rose, now 4 years old, runs barefoot across the grass, chasing butterflies. Her laughter echoes through the yard where Sarah stands at the porch steps, her hands dusted with flour from preparing Sunday lunch. Sarah rebuilt her life beautifully. She returned to nursing and found joy in both her career and her role as a mother. She's currently dating a kind pediatrician named David who treats Rose like she's his own daughter and speaks to me with genuine respect and affection. The Safe Haven Foundation has grown beyond my wildest dreams. 7 homes now operate across 3 states, with plans for an 8th underway. Hundreds of women have found safety and dignity within their walls. Some stayed briefly until they could secure their independence. Others became permanent residents, contributing to the community we built together. Judge Patricia Williams and Dr. Elena Vasquez reconciled and are now happily married. They volunteer regularly at the foundation and have become dear friends. Patricia often says that our chance encounter in that courtroom reminded her that it's never too late for second chances. Jessica Rodriguez became one of our most dedicated volunteers. She moved to Phoenix and now manages our largest safe haven home. Her genuine desire to make amends for her brother's actions has blossomed into a passionate advocacy for elderly women's rights. That afternoon, an envelope arrived addressed to me. It was an invitation to the dedication of our newest safe haven home. As I read the details, I felt overwhelmed by how far we'd come from that dark day when I thought I might lose everything. Later that week, the mayor of Phoenix visited our original home with a proclamation declaring it a beacon of hope and dignity for women in crisis. As Rose climbed into my lap holding a purple flower, the same color as Robert's beloved violets, I realized how completely our lives had transformed. Looking back now, I see that true strength was never about fighting louder or being meaner than those who tried to hurt us. It was about standing calmly with truth in our hands, refusing to be erased or forgotten. Robert's letter had told me to use power not to hurt, but to teach. And that's what we tried to do. Sarah learned that respect cannot be forced, only earned through genuine love and care. I learned that dignity is something we must protect for ourselves and others. Most importantly, we both learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who choose to stand with you when the world seems darkest. The foundation has received national attention. We've been featured in magazines and on news programs. I've been invited to speak at conferences about elder abuse and women's rights. But my favorite moments are still the quiet ones, sitting with a new resident as she finds her footing, watching women support each other through difficult transitions, seeing the light return to eyes that had been dimmed by mistreatment. Michael served his purpose in our story, though not in the way he intended. His betrayal forced us to discover our own strength. His greed revealed the treasure Robert had left us. His cruelty inspired us to create something beautiful. Even his death contributed to our mission through his sister's generous gesture. I heard through Jessica that Michael expressed remorse in his final days, though whether that was genuine or simply another manipulation, I'll never know. I've chosen to hope it was real, not for his sake, but for my own peace of mind. As for me, I discovered there's a profound difference between getting older and growing old. The first happens to everyone who's lucky enough to survive. The second is a choice. I chose to grow, to learn, to build something that would outlast me. Robert would have been proud, I think. Not just of the foundation or the money we've used to help others, but of the woman I became when I had to stand alone. He always believed I was stronger than I knew. It just took losing almost everything to prove him right. Every morning, I still rise at 6 a.m. I still brew my coffee in that chipped blue mug that's somehow survived all these years of daily use. I still tend to the violets on the windowsill, though now I grow them in a beautiful greenhouse attached to our original safe haven home. But now I do these things not out of lonely habit, but as reminders of the journey that brought me here, to this place of purpose, fulfillment, and deep, abiding joy. The violets bloom year-round now, purple flowers that seem to carry Robert's presence with them. Sometimes, when the light hits them just right, I swear I can feel him smiling at what we've built from the ashes of what almost was. Rose comes to me often with questions about her grandfather, the man she'll never meet but whose love shaped the world she's growing up in. I tell her about his kindness, his foresight, his quiet strength. I tell her that she carries the best parts of all of us: Robert's determination, Sarah's compassion, and perhaps a bit of my own stubborn refusal to give up. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, if you felt moved by this journey from despair to hope, I want you to know that you have that same strength inside you. Whatever challenge you're facing, whatever person is trying to diminish you or take what's rightfully yours, remember that you are worthy of dignity, respect, and love. Sometimes the victory is dramatic, like walking into a courtroom and watching justice prevail. But more often, it's simply the quiet decision to keep going, to refuse to be broken, to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. The most beautiful chapters of our lives may indeed be the ones we haven't written yet. At 73, I found love in new friendships, purpose in helping others, and joy in watching my family grow and thrive. I discovered that endings can become beginnings, that loss can transform into abundance, and that the love we give away returns to us in ways we never expected. This story means the world to me, and sharing it with all of you has been such an honor. If it touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, share it with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they know. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from around the world. I love connecting with viewers from every corner of our beautiful planet. Check out the other incredible stories on this channel, because everyone deserves to know that no matter how dark things seem, there's always hope for a brighter tomorrow. Until next time, remember that you are valued, you are loved, and you are never alone in your struggles. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Your support means everything.